There is a specific kind of desperation that tastes like rain and cheap convenience store coffee. It is the metallic taste of knowing you are exactly one stamp on a passport away from vanishing from the face of the earth. For Nia Mthembu, that desperation led her to the 37th floor of a Gangnam skyscraper, where a man in a bespoke suit was about to lock the door and offer her a choice: become his property or become a ghost. Welcome back to Stories by Moonlight. Before this story begins, tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it? Don't forget to smash that subscribe button, like, and share. Now, let's begin. Click. The sound was soft, expensive, and final. It was the sound of magnetic locks engaging inside a doorframe made of reinforced steel. Nia Mthembu froze in her chair. She didn't turn around. She didn't have to. The air in the room had changed instantly. A moment ago, this had been an executive office in the heart of Gangnam, a minimalist cathedral of black walnut, obsidian glass, and a view of Seoul that stretched all the way to the Han River. Now, it was a cage. And she was sitting across the desk from the predator, holding the key. Kang Min-jae didn't look like a monster. That was the first dangerous thing about him. He looked like a GQ cover brought to terrifying life. Mid-30s, shoulders that strained the fabric of a suit that cost more than Nia's entire education. His hair was styled with severe precision, revealing a face of sharp angles and cold, Arctic beauty. He wasn't looking at her. He was reading a file. Her file. "Your visa expires in 12 days, he said. His voice was a baritone rumble that vibrated in the mahogany desk, traveling up through Nia's forearms. It wasn't a question. Nia gripped the fabric of her H&M blazer, the one she'd bought on sale for this interview. "I have an extension pending," she lied. Her voice was steady, thank God. Your immigration lawyer is a fraud operating out of a basement in Itaewon," Min-jae corrected, flipping a page. "And your application was rejected 48 hours ago." He finally looked up. His eyes were dark, void-like. They dissected her. They took in the frantic pulse at her throat, the scuffed heels she'd tried to polish with a marker, the exhaustion bruising the skin under her eyes. "You are not here for an executive assistant position, Miss Mthembu, because no legitimate company would hire a woman who is technically already a fugitive." Nia stood up. Fight or flight. "I think I should leave," she said, grabbing her bag. "Sit down." He didn't shout. He didn't have to. The command cracked through the room like a whip. Nia's legs hit the chair before she consciously decided to obey. Min-jae stood up. He walked around the desk. He moved with a fluid, lethal grace that set off every alarm bell Nia possessed. He leaned against the edge of the desk, crossing his arms. He was close now. Too close. She could smell him, sandalwood, rain, and the icy scent of power. "You are drowning, Nia," he said softly. "You work 3 jobs: English tutor, restaurant hostess, weekend translator." He tilted his head, studying her like a specimen. "And yet, you are 3 months behind on your mother's medical bills in Cape Town." The air left Nia's lungs. "How do you—" "I know everything," he cut her off. "I know that she has stage 4 lymphoma. I know that the hospital is threatening to cut off her treatment on the 1st of the month." He leaned closer, invading her personal space, his dark eyes locking her in place. "And I know that if you get deported, she dies alone." The cruelty of it made Nia's vision blur. Tears pricked her eyes. Hot, angry tears. Who are you? She whispered. Why are you doing this? I am the man offering you a lifeline. He reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a photograph and slid it across the sleek surface of the desk. Nia looked down. It was a man, Korean, older, smiling at a charity gala. Lee Sang-ho, Minjai said, the name dripping with venom. Import-export businessman, philanthropist. Minjai's face hardened. The mask of the CEO slipped, revealing the gangster beneath. And the man who murdered my brother? Nia looked from the photo to Minjai. I don't understand. What does this have to do with me? He frequents a members-only tea house in Insadong every Thursday. He meets with associates. He discusses business that never appears on paper. Minjai placed a hand on the desk, leaning over her, trapping her between his body and the chair. I need ears in that room. I need someone who can pour tea, look submissive, and disappear into the background. His gaze raked over her skin. Seoul has a complicated relationship with diversity, Nia. You know this. He reached out. His fingers brushed a loose curl of her hair, tucking it behind her ear. The touch was shocking, electric. His fingertips were rough, calloused, the hands of a man who dealt violence, not paperwork. People see you, he murmured, his voice dropping to a husk. They see a foreigner, an outsider, and then they dismiss you. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. They think you don't understand their language. They think you are irrelevant. That makes you the perfect spy. Nia pulled back, her heart hammering against her ribs. You want me to spy for the Mafia? I want you to be my asset. He straightened up, walking back to his side of the desk. He opened a drawer and pulled out a single sheet of paper, a contract, and a bank transfer receipt. He placed them in front of her. Nia looked at the receipt. Her eyes widened. It was a transfer to the St. Augustine Hospital in Cape Town. Amount paid in full. Sign the contract, Minjai said. And I authorize the transfer right now. Your mother's treatment is covered for a year. I fix your visa. I give you an apartment where the heating actually works. He paused, letting the weight of the offer crush her. Refuse, and I unlock the door. You walk out. Immigration picks you up tomorrow, and your mother enters end-of-life care by the weekend. Nia stared at the paper. It was blood money. She knew that. She was selling her safety, her morals, maybe her life. But then she thought of her mother's voice on the phone yesterday. Weak, breathless, trying to pretend she wasn't in pain. She looked at Minjai. He was watching her with that intense, predatory stillness. If I do this, she said, her voice trembling, I belong to you. Minjai's eyes darkened. He walked back around the desk. He stood behind her chair. He placed his hands on her shoulders. His grip was heavy, possessive. He leaned down, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. The heat of his body enveloped her. Make no mistake, Nia, he whispered. You belong to me the moment you pick up that pen. He slid one hand down her arm, covering her hand, guiding it to the pen. I will own your time, your loyalty, your secrets. He squeezed her hand. But in exchange, I promise you this. His breath ghosted over her neck, sending a shiver straight to her core. You are safe now. Nia picked up the pen. Her hand shook. She signed her name. Nia Mthembu. Minjai took the paper. He didn't smile. He just nodded, satisfied. He pressed a button on his desk. Click. The door unlocked. Welcome to the team, he said. But as Nia stood up, legs wobbling, looking at the man who had just bought her soul. She knew the truth. She hadn't just joined a team. She had walked into a lion's den, and the lion was already hungry. Most people say they would never sell their soul. They judge women like Nia. But most people haven't watched their mother dying by inches, knowing money is the only cure. If you would judge Nia for signing that paper, stop watching now. This story is for those who understand sacrifice. Comment "I understand" below if you would have signed that paper too. Nia didn't just move, she was extracted. 2 hours after she signed the contract, a team of movers arrived at her Goshiwon in Sinchon. They didn't pack her boxes, they disposed of them. Mr. Kang insists on a fresh start, the lead mover said, handing her a key card. Her new apartment was in Hanam-dong, the Beverly Hills of Seoul. It was sterile, expensive, and terrifyingly silent compared to the chaotic noise of her old life. But the most jarring change wasn't the address. It was the closet. It wasn't empty, it was full. Rows of silk blouses in muted creams and charcoals. Pencil skirts that fit like a second skin. Cashmere coats that whispered wealth. No bright colors, no patterns. Everything was designed to make her look elegant, expensive, and completely forgettable. Camouflage, Min-jae had called it during their brief phone call that morning. You must look like you belong in the room, but not like you deserve to be spoken to. 3 days later, Nia stood in the center of Min-jae's private office, learning exactly what that meant. It was late. The city lights of Seoul were a blurry galaxy behind the glass, casting long shadows across the floor. Min-jae was teaching her the tech. Turn around, he commanded. Nia obeyed. She was wearing one of the silk blouses he had bought. It felt cool against her skin, but inside, she was burning up. Min-jae stepped closer. He didn't touch her at first. He just stood behind her, his body heat radiating into her back like a furnace. The receiver goes here. His fingers brushed the sensitive skin behind her ear. Nia gasped softly. Min-jae paused. His hand lingered, his fingertips rough and calloused against her softness. Nervous? He murmured, his voice a low rumble near her temple. I've never worn a wire before. She managed to whisper. It is not a wire. It is a subdermal conductor. It relies on bone conduction. He slid his thumb down the column of her neck to secure the transmitter beneath her collar. His touch was clinical, tactical, and yet it was the most intimate thing Nia had ever felt. He traced the line of her collarbone, his knuckles grazing the swell of her breast through the thin silk. Nia stopped breathing. They won't look at you, Min-jae whispered, his breath ghosting over her skin, sending shivers cascading down her spine. They will see a foreigner serving tea. They will assume you are deaf and dumb to their world. He leaned in, his chest pressing lightly against her shoulder blades, trapping her. But I will be listening to every word they say. He adjusted the collar of her blouse, his grip tightening slightly, possessive and controlling. And to every breath you take, he finished darkly. Don't disappoint me, Nia. By the time Thursday evening arrived, Nia felt like a wire pulled tight enough to snap. The tea house in Insadong was a labyrinth of sliding paper doors and heavy cedar wood scent. It was old money, the kind of place that didn't have a sign out front because the people who mattered already knew where it was. Nia knelt on the tatami mat, arranging the tea set. Her hands were steady, drilled by 40 hours of practice, but her heart was hammering against her ribs. The door slid open. Lee Sang-ho walked in. Seeing the man from the photograph in the flesh was nauseating. He looked like a grandfather, kindly, soft, harmless. But Nia knew the truth. He was a butcher. He sat down with two other men, their suits dark and expensive. Nia bowed low. "Green tea, Master Lee," she said in perfect deferential Korean. Lee glanced at her. His eyes slid over her face, her body, and then dismissed her entirely. "Fine," he grunted. It worked. He didn't see a threat. He saw furniture. Nia poured the tea. The steam rose, carrying the scent of jasmine, masking the sweat prickling on her palms. "Place the pot to his right." Min Jae's voice crackled in her ear. It was startlingly clear. It sounded like he was inside her head, standing right beside her. "The bug is under the saucer. Slide it when you refill. His cup." Nia's pulse spiked. She waited. They started talking. Smuggling routes, payoffs to the Port Authority in Busan, names, dates. Nia moved to refill the cup. Her hand hovered. "Now," Min Jae commanded. She slid the saucer forward. Her finger deftly detached the microtransmitter and stuck it to the underside of the heavy wooden table. It took less than a second. "Enjoy," she whispered. She bowed and backed out of the room, sliding the door shut with a soft click. She walked down the hallway, her legs feeling like jelly, every instinct screaming at her to run. "Stop," Min Jae said in her ear. She froze. Had she been caught? "You did it." His voice had changed. The cold command was gone. It was lower, thicker. "Perfect placement. Crystal clear audio. Good girl." The praise hit her lower belly like a physical blow. Nia leaned against the wall, trembling. She hated him. She hated this. But God help her. The heat pooling between her legs told a different story. She wanted him to say it again. The adrenaline didn't crash until she was back in Min Jae's apartment at 11 p.m. His home was different from his office. It was darker, more personal. There were books on the floor, a half-empty bottle of Hibiki whiskey on the counter. Nia stood by the window, watching the rain streak the glass, shaking from the aftershocks of the night. Min Jae walked in from the bedroom. He had discarded his jacket and tie. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and ink. Tattoos, dark, swirling dragons that disappeared up his sleeves. The mark of the Kang pie. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey and walked to her, handing her one. "Drink." Nia took it. She downed half of it in one swallow. The burn was grounding. "Did you get what you needed?" she asked, her voice raspy. "Enough to start crippling his logistics." Min Jae leaned against the window frame, watching her. His eyes were heavy-lidded, predatory. "You were terrified," he stated. "I was doing my job. I could hear your heart rate on the monitor. It spiked to 140 when he looked at you." He stepped closer. "But you didn't run. You didn't flinch." He reached out. This time, there was no tech to adjust. No tactical excuse. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his thumb lingering on her cheekbone. "I hired you because you were invisible," he murmured, his gaze dropping to her mouth. "I needed a ghost." He stepped in, crowding her against the cold glass. "But watching you tonight, hearing you breathe in my ear." His hand slid down to her neck, his thumb pressing against her pulse point, feeling the frantic rhythm he caused. "I hate that I made you invisible." "Why?" she breathed, her voice barely audible. Min Jae's eyes locked onto hers, burning with a dark, possessive hunger. "Because I want the whole world to know who you belong to." He leaned in. Nia closed her eyes, tilting her head back, waiting for the kiss. She wanted it. She wanted the monster to claim her. But he didn't kiss her. He brushed his lips against her forehead, a chaste, confusing, devastating touch. Go home, Nia, he whispered roughly, pulling away as if she burned him. Before I forget that you are an employee and I am your boss. He turned his back on her. Go. Nia left, but as the elevator descended, carrying her away from the man who held her life in his hands, she realized something terrifying. The lock on the door wasn't the only thing keeping her here anymore. She was falling, and there was no one to catch her but him. Minjae is fighting his own instincts. He wants to protect her, but he's the one putting her in danger. Do you think he pulled away to save her, or to save himself? Most women would run, but Nia is staying. Tell us in the comments what you think he's really afraid of. The shift in their dynamic wasn't sudden. It was a slow, terrifying erosion of boundaries. For 2 weeks, Nia played the perfect spy. She wore the clothes, poured the tea, and fed Minjae the secrets of Seoul's underworld. But the spaces between the missions were becoming complicated. It was the way he looked at her when she translated a difficult dialect. The way he ensured her favorite South African rooibos tea was stocked in his kitchen. The way he stopped locking the office door when she was inside. And then came the night he took her to Namsan Tower. We need to discuss Lee's connection to the city council, Minjae had said, fastening his watch. It's safer to talk in the open. But it didn't feel like a briefing. It felt like a date. They stood on the observation deck, the wind whipping Nia's hair across her face, looking out at the sprawling, glittering nervous system of Seoul. Minjae wasn't looking at the city. He was looking at the darkness beyond it. My brother loved this view, he said quietly. It was the first time he had mentioned him without the armor of anger. Ji-hoon. He was 23. He didn't care about territory or respect. He wanted to study music theory at Yonsei. Minjae's hands gripped the railing, his knuckles white. He was the softest thing our family ever produced. And because of that, he was the easiest target. Nia looked at his profile, the sharp jaw, the cruelty etched around his mouth that protected the wound underneath. That's why you do it, she realized, her voice carried away by the wind. You aren't fighting for power. You're fighting a ghost. Minjae turned to her. The raw vulnerability in his eyes stole the breath from her lungs. I am fighting to silence the guilt, he rasped, because I was the one who was supposed to be in the car that night, not him. He stepped closer, closing the distance between them until the rest of the tourists faded into background noise. I built an empire of monsters to make sure no one could ever hurt what was mine again. His gaze dropped to her lips. And now, I am terrified that I have brought a monster straight to you. The elevator ride down from the tower was agonizing. They were alone in the metal box, suspended above the city. The air was thick enough to choke on. Minjae stood in the corner, watching her reflection in the steel doors. Nia could feel his gaze like a physical weight. She turned to face him. Minjae. He moved, one stride, and he was in front of her. He didn't touch her, but he crowded her space, his body heat overwhelming her senses. I hired a spy, he growled, his voice rough with frustration. I needed a ghost, an asset, a tool. He reached out, his thumb tracing the fullness of her lower lip, dragging it down slightly. I didn't plan on this. On what? she whispered, her heart hammering against his chest. On wanting to burn the contract. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. On wanting to keep you in my tower and never let you leave. He tilted her head back. His mouth hovered inches from hers. Nia parted her lips, inviting him, begging him. Ding! The doors slid open. The lobby was full of people. Min-jae pulled back instantly. The mask slammed back into place. The car is waiting, he said coldly. But as he walked ahead of her, Nia saw his hand clench into a fist at his side. He was fighting it, and for the first time, Nia realized she wanted him to lose. The crash came 3 days later. Thursday, in Sedong, the tea house. Nia was pouring tea for Lee Sang-ho and a new associate, a man from the Busan syndicate. She was confident now. She moved with fluid grace, invisible and efficient. But then Lee spoke. The South African connection is becoming a problem, he said in Korean, sipping his tea. Nia's hand froze for a fraction of a second. She forced herself to set the pot down gently. Mthembu's information was useful 15 years ago, Lee continued, oblivious to the woman standing 3 feet away. But he's outlived his value. He's asking for more money to stay hidden. Handle it cleanly. Mthembu, her father's surname, her surname. The world tilted on its axis. The tea house walls seemed to stretch and warp. Nia bowed, backed out of the room, and collapsed against the wall in the hallway. She fumbled for her earpiece. Did you hear that? She hissed. Silence. Min-jae, answer me. Did you hear him say my name? Static. Then Min-jae's voice. Flat, emotionless. Meet me, Bampo Hangang Park, now. The Han River at night usually looked like a painting, dark water reflecting the city lights, the rainbow fountain dancing from the bridge. Tonight, it looked like a grave. Nia found Min-jae sitting on a bench facing the water. He was rigid, a statue carved from guilt. My father, Nia said, walking up to him. She didn't sit. She stood over him, trembling with a rage that was hotter than fear. Lee Sang-ho mentioned my father, said he was a South African connection, that he's outlived his usefulness. Min-jae didn't look up. I know. You know? Her voice cracked. You knew my father worked for Lee? Is that why you hired me? Is this some sick game? Am I just bait? Min-jae stood up slowly. He turned to face her. Your father worked for Lee's organization 15 years ago. He helped establish their smuggling routes, minerals, weapons. Min-jae took a step toward her, his eyes hollow. He was there the night my brother died, Nia. Nia took a step back, shaking her head. No, my father left when I was 9. He drove the car. The words hit her like bullets. He drove the car that ran Ji-hoon off the road. He watched my brother burn. Nia couldn't breathe. The air in her lungs turned to ash. You knew, she whispered. From the beginning. Yes. You hired me to flush him out. I thought if Lee connected you to your father, he would panic. He would reach out, and I could get to them both. You used me. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation that cut deeper than any knife. Yes. Min-jae didn't deny it. He didn't try to soften it. I used you. You were a tool, a means to an end. He reached out, as if to touch her arm, but stopped himself. But somewhere between the office and Namsan Tower, you stopped being a tool. Don't, she snapped, tears spilling over. Don't you dare try to make this romantic. You looked me in the eye. You paid my mother's medical bills. You made me feel safe. And all the while, you were hunting my father. I was hunting a murderer! Min-jae roared, his control finally snapping. And now I am trying to save his daughter. I don't need you to save me, Nia spat. I need to get away from you. She turned to leave. Her phone buzzed. Once. Long. A video message. Unknown number. Nia froze. A cold dread, heavier than anything she had felt in Min-jae's office, settled in her stomach. She opened it. Min-jae stepped closer, looking over her shoulder. On the screen, a man was bound to a chair in a warehouse. He was older, grayer than she remembered, but it was him. Her father. Blood ran down his temple. He was unconscious. The camera panned up. Lee Sang-ho stood behind the chair, smiling pleasantly at the lens. Kang Min-jae? Lee's voice purred through the speaker, tinny and terrifying. I hear you've taken an interest in South African linguistics? How fascinating that your new assistant shares a surname with an old friend. Lee placed a hand on her father's shoulder. Shall we discuss terms? You have 24 hours to surrender yourself. Come alone to the old shipyard in Incheon. Lee leaned into the camera, his eyes dead. If you are not here by midnight, I send her father back to Cape Town in pieces, and then I come for the girl. The video cut to black. The silence on the riverbank was deafening. Nia stared at the black screen. Her father. Dying. Because of her. Because of Min-jae. She looked up at Min-jae. He wasn't looking at the phone. He was looking at her. His face was a mask of agony. He knew what she was thinking. You caused this. But his eyes held a question that would define the rest of their lives. Do you trust me enough to save him? Even knowing he killed my brother? And Nia looked back, her heart shattering into 1,000 razor-sharp pieces. Do you love me enough to choose justice over revenge? He used her. He lied to her. He planned to destroy her family. But right now, Min-jae is the only thing standing between Nia's father and a grave. Would you forgive the monster if he was your only hope? If you are loyal to the end, hit the like button and tell us. Could you forgive him? The silence on the riverbank was broken only by the distant wail of a siren, a sound that seemed to mourn for them before the bodies even fell. Nia stared at the phone in her hand, the black screen reflecting her own terrified eyes. 24 hours. That was the deadline Lee Sang-ho had given. But looking at Min-jae, Nia knew he didn't plan on waiting 24 hours. He was already moving, already calculating. The grief that had paralyzed him moments ago was gone, replaced by a cold, terrifying efficiency. He was no longer the man who had confessed his sins on Namsan Tower. He was the ghost of Gangnam. Go to the apartment, Min-jae said, his voice void of emotion. Pack a bag. My driver will take you to the airport. You are on the first flight to Cape Town. Nia blinked, the command not fully registering. What? I will handle Lee. I will get your father back, but I cannot do it if I am worried about you in the crossfire. He turned to walk away, dismissing her, saving her. No. The word was quiet, but it stopped him. Min-jae turned back, his brows drawing together. This is not a negotiation, Nia. You are leaving. I'm not leaving. Nia stepped closer, closing the distance between them. The wind whipped her hair across her face, but she didn't brush it away. You used me to find him. You put him in that chair. You don't get to send me away while you clean up the mess. He killed my brother! Min-jae roared, the controls snapping for a fraction of a second. And he is my father! Nia shouted back. She grabbed the lapels of his jacket, forcing him to look at her. You said I belong to you, Minjai? You made me sign the paper. You said I was yours. She shook him, her hands trembling. Well, I am yours, and you don't get to protect me only when it's easy. If you go into that warehouse, you take me with you. Minjai stared at her. He looked at the fire in her eyes, the stubborn set of her jaw. He saw the fear, yes, but he also saw something else. Loyalty. A loyalty he hadn't earned. A loyalty he didn't deserve. He covered her hands with his own. His grip was crushing. If you come with me, he whispered, his voice rough, you will see things you cannot unsee. You will see the monster in the light. I've seen the monster, Nia said, thinking of the way he touched her, the way he looked at her in the dark. I'm not afraid of him. Minjai closed his eyes. He pressed his forehead against hers, breathing her in like she was oxygen in a burning room. Then God help us both, he groaned. He pulled away, his face hardening into stone. Get in the car. The drive to Incheon was a blur of neon lights and suffocating tension. Minjai didn't speak. He was on his phone, speaking in rapid, coded Korean to his security team. He wasn't calling for an army. He was calling for a cleanup crew. They wait at the perimeter, he ordered. No one goes in until I give the signal. He hung up and glanced at Nia. He reached into the glove box and pulled out a gun. It was sleek, black, heavy. He placed it in her lap. Do you know how to use this? No. Safety is here. Point, pull, don't hesitate. Nia touched the cold metal. It felt real, horrifyingly real. Stay in the car, Minjai commanded as they pulled up to the rusted gates of the old shipyard. I said you come with me. I didn't say you walk into the kill zone. He grabbed her hand, squeezing it once, hard. If I am not back in 20 minutes, you leave. You don't look back. He didn't wait for an answer. He got out. Nia watched through the tinted glass. The warehouse was a hulking shadow against the night sky. Single floodlight illuminated the entrance. 2 guards stood by the door, smoking. Minjai didn't sneak. He didn't hide. He walked straight toward them, his coat billowing in the wind. The guards straightened up, shouting something. Minjai didn't slow down. 2 shots rang out. Pop, pop, silenced, efficient. The guards dropped before they could even raise their weapons. Minjai stepped over their bodies and disappeared inside. Nia sat in the silence, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. 1 minute passed. 2. She looked at the gun in her lap. She thought about her father, about the blood on his temple. She thought about Minjai walking alone into a room full of men who wanted him dead. Screw this, she whispered. She grabbed the gun. She opened the car door, and she ran toward the warehouse. The inside of the warehouse smelled of rust, seawater, and copper. Nia kept to the shadows, moving behind crates of shipping containers, just as Minjai had taught her to be invisible. She heard voices. You came alone, Lee Sang-ho's voice echoed from the center of the room. Arrogant to the end, just like your brother. Nia peeked around the corner of a rusted container. Minjai stood in the center of the open floor. He was surrounded by 6 men with automatic weapons. Lee Sang-ho stood on a raised platform, a gun pressed to the head of Nia's father, who was slumped in a chair, barely conscious. I am here, Minjai said calmly. Let him go. Let him go? Lee laughed. The man who killed your brother? I thought you wanted justice, Minjai. I want you dead, Minjai said. The rest is detail. Kill him, Lee ordered his men. The air exploded. Nia screamed, but the sound was lost in the gunfire. But Minjai was already moving. He dove behind a pillar as bullets chewed up the concrete where he had been standing. He returned fire. He wasn't spraying bullets. He was picking targets. 1. A man on the left dropped. 2. A man on the catwalk fell over the railing. It was a dance of violence, terrifying and mesmerizing. Minjai moved with a fluidity that didn't seem human. He was a storm of focused rage, but there were too many of them. One of the men flanked him, raising a shotgun. Minjai! Nia screamed. She stepped out from the shadows. She raised the gun with both hands. She didn't aim. She just pulled the trigger. The shot went wild, sparking off the metal wall. But it was enough. The gunman turned, distracted. Minjai spun. He saw her. His eyes went wide with terror, not for himself, but for her. Nia, get down! He shot the gunman who was looking at her. Then he sprinted across the open floor, sliding across the concrete to cover her body with his own as Lee Sang-ho opened fire from the platform. I told you to stay in the car, Minjai roared, pressing her into the dirt behind a stack of pallets. I couldn't let you die. He looked at her. He looked at the gun in her shaking hands. And he kissed her. Hard, desperate. A kiss that tasted of gunpowder and adrenaline. Stay here, he ordered. Don't move. He stood up. He didn't take cover this time. He walked out into the open, firing as he walked. He took out the last 2 guards. Lee Sang-ho was alone on the platform. He grabbed Nia's father, using him as a shield. Stop! Lee screamed. Or I blow his brains out. Minjai stopped. He raised his gun. His chest was heaving. Blood dripped from a graze on his cheek. You have nowhere to go, Lee. I have the girl's father. You think you can save him? You think she'll forgive you if he dies? Minjai looked up at the platform. He looked at the man who had ordered his brother's death. And then he looked at the man in the chair, the man who had driven the car. Nia! Minjai shouted without looking back. Close your eyes! Nia didn't close them. She couldn't. Minjai raised his weapon. He didn't aim at Lee. He aimed at the metal chain holding the heavy industrial hook suspended above the platform. He fired. The chain snapped. The hook swung down like a pendulum of God. It slammed into Lee Sang-ho, knocking him backward, away from her father, pinning him against the back wall with a sickening crunch of bone and metal. Lee screamed. Minjai didn't hesitate. He sprinted up the stairs to the platform. Lee was pinned, gasping, blood bubbling from his mouth. Minjai stood over him. He looked at the man who had haunted his nightmares for 3 years. For Ji-hoon? Minjai whispered. He raised his gun. Bang! The threat was gone, eliminated. Minjai holstered his weapon. He turned to the chair. Nia's father groaned, lifting his head. He looked at Minjai with swollen eyes. He knew who Minjai was. He expected a bullet. Minjai pulled a knife from his boot. He cut the ropes. Get up, Minjai said roughly. You! Her father croaked. You're Kang's brother. Yes. Minjai stared at him. The urge to kill him was there, a dark pulse in his blood. But then he looked down at the warehouse floor. At Nia. Running toward the stairs, climbing them 2 at a time. She threw herself at her father, sobbing. Minjai watched them. He watched the reunion he would never have with Ji-hoon. He stepped back, giving them space. He turned away, Looking at Lee's body, he felt a hand on his arm. He turned. It was Nia. She didn't look at her father. She looked at him. She saw the blood on his face. She saw the monster in the light, and she didn't run. She reached out. She took his hand, the hand that had just killed a man. She brought it to her lips. "You saved him," she whispered. Minjae looked at her, his defenses crumbling. "I didn't do it for him," he rasped. "I know. I did it so you wouldn't have to mourn." He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her neck, shaking with the aftershocks of violence. "It's over, Nia," he promised, his voice breaking. "You're safe now." And as the sirens grew louder outside, signaling the arrival of his cleanup crew, Minjae knew the truth. He hadn't just saved her father. He had saved himself. The drive back to Hanamdong was silent, but the air in the car was heavy, charged with the aftermath of death and the electric, terrifying promise of what was to come. Minjae didn't touch her. He drove with white-knuckled precision, his eyes fixed on the rain-slicked road. But every time he shifted gears, his hand brushed her knee, sending a jolt of heat through her that had nothing to do with fear. They entered the penthouse like a storm. Minjae kicked the door shut, locking out the world, locking out the violence. He turned to her. He was still wearing his ruined shirt, stained with dirt and the blood of the men he had killed for her. "Go to your room," he rasped, his voice raw. I need to get clean." He tried to step away, to put distance between his darkness and her light. "No." Nia caught his hand. "You don't get to hide from me. Not anymore." She stepped closer, reaching for the buttons of his shirt. "You didn't just save him, Minjae. You saved me." "I am covered in blood, Nia," he groaned, catching her wrists. "I am unclean." "Then let me wash you." She looked up at him, her eyes fierce and undeniable. "You washed me once, when I was weak. Let me do this for you." Minjae stared at her, his resistance crumbling like ash. He nodded once. The master bathroom was a cavern of black marble and steam. Nia turned on the shower, the water pounding against the stone. She stripped him. She peeled the ruined shirt from his skin, revealing the tapestry of tattoos, the dragons, the scars, the history of violence written on his body. She pushed him under the spray. The water ran red for a moment, swirling down the drain. Nia stepped in with him. She didn't care about her clothes. She pressed her wet body against his hard, shivering frame. She took the soap. She washed his chest, his arms, his hands. Minjae stood paralyzed, his head thrown back, surrendering to her touch. "I tried to keep you invisible," he whispered, the words torn from his throat. He opened his eyes, looking down at her through the steam. "I tried to keep you a ghost. But God help me, Nia. You are the only thing I see." He grabbed her waist, his grip bruising, possessive. "I can't be gentle tonight," he warned, his eyes burning with a dark, primal hunger. "I need to feel you. I need to know you are here." "I'm here," she breathed. "I'm yours." The confession snapped the last of his control. He kissed her. It wasn't a question. It was a collision. He lifted her up, wrapping her legs around his waist, and carried her out of the shower, dripping wet, into the bedroom. He threw her onto the bed. He didn't wait. He didn't hesitate. He stripped her wet clothes off with desperate, tearing motions, worshipping the skin he revealed with his hands, his mouth. "Mine," He growled against her throat, biting the sensitive skin. Every breath, every heartbeat. He positioned himself between her legs. He looked at her, really looked at her, with a terrifying intensity. "Say it," he commanded. "Tell me who you belong to." "Min Jae." "Say it." "I belong to you," she sobbed, arching up to meet him. "I am yours." He entered her with one powerful claiming thrust. Naya screamed his name, the sound lost in his mouth as he kissed her again. It was an exorcism. With every thrust, he drove away the fear, the death, the warehouse. He moved with a punishing rhythm, demanding everything she had, giving everything he was. The storm raged outside, rattling the windows, but in that bed, there was only the heat of their bodies and the desperate, messy reality of being alive. Minjae buried his face in her neck, groaning as he found his release, pouring himself into her, binding them together in the most ancient way possible. He collapsed on top of her, heavy and warm, his heart hammering against hers. Nia wrapped her arms around him, holding the monster who had become her man. And as the adrenaline faded into exhaustion, she realized the truth. The lock on the door didn't matter anymore. She was never leaving. 6 months later. The view from the office hadn't changed. Seoul still glittered like a jewel box below. But the office had. There was a second desk now. Sleek, white, positioned right beside the black walnut masterpiece. Nia sat behind it, reviewing the logistics for the new shipping route, the legal one. The door opened. Minjae walked in. He looked different, lighter. The shadows under his eyes were gone. He walked over to her desk. "The transfer is complete," he said. Nia looked at the screen. The confirmation from the specialist clinic in Gangnam. Her mother arrived tomorrow. First class. Fully paid for. Nia stood up. "Thank you," she whispered. Minjae shook his head. "I promised you," he said. "Paid in full." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He didn't kneel. He wasn't a man who knelt. He opened it. A diamond ring. Simple. Flawless. "I don't need a spy anymore," he said, taking her hand. "I need a partner. I need a wife." He looked at her with that same intensity that had terrified her in the beginning, but now it only made her feel invincible. "Will you sign one more contract with me, Nia?" Nia looked at the ring, then at the man who had bought her soul and given her his heart in exchange. She smiled. "Only if there's no exit clause." Minjae slid the ring onto her finger. "Never," he promised. He kissed her, and as the sun set over the city they now ruled together, Nia knew she was finally, truly seen. They found redemption in the dark. They survived the war. But not everyone gets saved. Right now, on your screen, is a story about a woman who made the wrong choice. A woman who ran when she should have fought. Do not let her story go unheard. Click this video now, because in this world, blood may stain hands, but love stains the soul.